The universe of Warhammer 40k is a vast and terrifying place, filled with unfathomable eldritch horrors, armies of incomprehensible scale, and antediluvian technologies undreamt of by even the most pathological futurists. So with that in mind, we should ask ourselves what, in this endless abyss of nightmares and death we call the 41st millennium, is the most powerful weapon in the galaxy? Is it the city-killing weapons of warlord titans? The planet-cracking guns of that big ship that Abaddon drives around sometimes? Or the star-quenching power of a Blackstone Fortress, the board game? Nah, man, it's like 1B, like a little bumblebee. Man, 40k is wild.
Down on the beast!
What's up, folks? Welcome back to Tactical Tortoise. My name is Trevi, and we are back with another episode of Ridiculous Rules. This is the Warhammer 40k video series where I talk about ridiculous rules interactions in Warhammer 40k on the tabletop and what makes them tick. Let me know if you like this style of content by hitting like, hitting the subscribe button, doing all that YouTube stuff down below. You've heard it a billion times before, but for kind of weird, offbeat videos like this, it really helps tell me what people like. So if you do enjoy this style of video, it helps me out, and then I can make more videos like this. This video is also brought to you by the Tactical Tortoise patrons. They voted for it on a little patron poll that I had. So if you want to decide the future of videos on the Tactical Tortoise channel, you can visit them over at patreon.com/tacticaltortoise and vote when the polls go up. It's very exciting. But today, we're talking about the most powerful weapon in Warhammer 40k, and what makes it so absurd. And before I hear you post in the comments that you just know we're going to talk about a Vortex Missile, or a Bellicosa Volcano Cannon, or the Sun Fury Plasma Annihilator, or that old weird Doomsday device that Chaos had that could literally end the game. Literally, they had a unit called a Doomsday device that blew up the planet. That's ridiculous. Or an Ariok Power Claw that punches for, holy crap, it's 18 flat damage? That's crazy! But no, it's not any of those things. It's actually a weapon that you can equip in a regular game of 40k. You could even take one in a game of Combat Patrol if you wanted. Almost any size game, you could take one of these things. But even so, it's still a weapon that has the capability of one-shotting your opponent's entire army in a single shooting phase. So what, pray tell, is this mythical god weapon? Is it some sort of Xenos sorcery? An ancient and technologically advanced archaeotech device lost to the ages? Maybe a relic bestowed by the Chaos Gods themselves upon the most worthy of their supplicants? Now, we already talked about it. It's a bee. It's like one bee. More accurately, it's a bunch of bees.
Down on the beast!
Let me, dear viewer, introduce you to Brog's Buzzbomb. Brog's Buzzbomb is a relic from Codex Orks, available only to Snakebites characters, and I think it just represents them throwing a bunch of bees at you that then get pretty ticked off and sting whoever else happens to be around the hapless individual who just got hit in the face with a bunch of bees. If we look at it, I mean, it's a pretty good profile. It's a 3d6 grenade that automatically hits for strength 5, neg 1 AP for 1 damage, kind of a pre-buff heavy bolter profile, which is nothing to shake a stick at. It also has the blast keyword, so it blows up like whole units of enemies, and has a pretty cool secondary effect where it resolves an additional 2d6 attacks against something else within 6 inches using the same weapon profile immediately after it attacks. It is kind of weird that the first sentence of the ability says it can only be used once a game, but then the second sentence of the ability says that you make 2 sets of attacks with it. That doesn't make sense, but we're going to ignore that for now. Also, the second set of attacks is pretty cool because it resolves attacks. It doesn't target with them, so you can get around targeting restrictions like the bodyguard rule or lookout, sir. But here's the problem. It doesn't say when the bees stop stinging.
Down on the beast!
And as it turns out, these aren't just regular bees. These are orc relic bees, and they're frickin' mad. So, how does this attack actually work? Once you've gotten your hapless bee delivery system into range and you select their target, things start out pretty straightforward. You auto-hit the target 3d6 times, or if there are over 10 models, it's just 18 times with strength 5, minus 1 AP, 1 damage attacks. If you kill your target, the bee's endless bloodlust is slaked for now, and they pause for a moment to reflect on their merciless killing and take a nap, sparing the innocent, unknowing world the bloody apocalypse that you might have unleashed upon them. However, if you picked something tough enough, stuff gets real wild. Per the text of the weapon ability, as soon as those first 3d6 attacks are resolved, you then get to resolve an additional 2d6 attacks using the same Buzz Bomb weapon against something else within 6 inches. Now, the term resolve is important here because for the core rulebook, the steps to resolve an attack start with rolling to hit. This is awkward because you have then skipped the phase that tells you to target a unit with those attacks, which happens when you've chosen to shoot in the shooting phase, which the attack sequence when you're rolling those attacks requires, since it refers to the target unit of the attack to reference its defensive profile. This could mean one of two things, both of which mean something equally hilarious, so I'm going to talk about both of them. The first interpretation is that you treat the selected unit as the target of just those additional attacks. So you've targeted the grenade at someone, and then the special ability of the grenade has a separate target. Or you consider the newly selected unit hit by the additional 2d6 attacks to also be the target of the Buzz Bomb weapon ability. I'm not 100% sure which reading is correct, but I'll give my thoughts about it at the end of the video. Feel free to let me know down in the comments how you think it should work. I'm pretty confident in my assumption, but I don't know. We'll talk about it. So let's assume that we're resolving this ability by the first interpretation that we talked about. You've nuked somebody for 3d6, strength 5, automatic hits, and somehow, miraculously, they've survived. Now, it's time to resolve that weapon ability, and we make 2d6 attacks against a new unit within 6 inches of the hapless, bloody, and probably severely stinging survivors of the first attack. This still uses the Buzz Bomb profile, but since we haven't chosen a new target for the attack yet, the attack wouldn't auto-hit, since it only auto-hits against the original target. So, you roll out 2d6, probably ballistic skill 5 because you're an orc guy, strength 5 hits on whoever is dumb enough to stand near a whole horde of angry bees. While the attacks don't auto-hit like we said, it does, however, trigger the Buzz Bomb's weapon ability again, since you're making the attacks with the Buzz Bomb weapon a second time. So, we go back to the original target, then pick another unit within 6 inches of it, and roll out the same attack against them too. And there's nothing to say that the first unit you select to hit with the 2d6 attacks cannot be hit again. So, unless they take casualties and pull outside 6 inches of the original target, they will eventually be killed by bees, who, once they're done feeding on your lifeless corpse, will just move on to the next helpless idiot within 6 inches of their original target and continue their bloody campaign of utter destruction until literally every single enemy unit in an enormous 6-inch bubble around their original target has been rendered into tiny, bee-sized giblets. While most other weapons in the game target a single enemy unit, none quite have the ability to deal such massive damage to such an immense swath of your opponent's army in one bloody, disgusting explosion of buzzy, stingy death. So could this Buzz Bomb get any more powerful than that? That sounds insane. Yes, the answer is yes. So what happens if we assume that the intention was for the weapon to work the other way that we proposed? So that it selects a new unit to be hit with 2d6 attacks as the target of the attack for the purposes of also the weapon ability, not just the attack profile. This is where stuff gets whack. Because now, the 2d6 extra attacks also auto-hit, which makes them even more dangerous. Although that's actually a small mercy to your opponent's models, since it will grant them a quicker reprieve from the unstoppable bee madness about to unfold upon them. You can now trigger the weapon's ability to deal an additional 2d6 hits to anything within 6 inches of the new target, not the original target, which then does the same thing to something else within 6 inches, and so on ad infinitum. Even better, there's no longer a restriction on chaining back to the unit you've already hit. So like a foul plague wind descending upon an unsuspecting medieval village, the mass of bloodthirsty bees can waft from one end of your opponent's army to the other, stinging everyone in their army to a painful, blistery death on their way. Step aside, Mortarion, and your crappy Death Guard posers. Your garbage contagion auras got nothing on this plague of bees. You can even just bounce it infinitely between two units, absolutely certainly killing one of them and definitely messing up the other one pretty badly. And just think about, like, having to counterplay this. You have to keep your entire army 6 inches away from each other, which means that you probably don't get any of your aura abilities or any of your synergies, and if you ever pile in onto an objective to grab it from all the orc boys that you're fighting, the idiot orc character who's carrying these things around in his little beekeeper outfit automatically kills your entire front line. And that's why I think it's pretty clear that the Buzz Bomb is not supposed to work by this interpretation. I think it's also worth mentioning that under this interpretation, if the bees do kill their subsequent targets, they do stop the chain. So this sort of limits the power of the weapon somewhat. That said, it still is probably enough to deal immense damage to your opponent's army, since 2d6 strength 5 attacks in one go probably isn't enough to wipe many units, so you can severely cripple a bunch of units in your opponent's army and then finish them off with subsequent shooting later. The way I read the rule, the subsequent attacks skip the targeting step of firing a ranged weapon, meaning that while they consider the model they're performing the attack against as the target for the purposes of the attack sequence to know what their save is and what their toughness is, for example, they still refer back to the original unit for the weapon abilities, since those are checked when you originally declare a target. Hence, they would only auto-hit against the first target, and they would never be able to go back and retarget that original target with the 2d6 follow-up attacks. There's also that one weird can only attack once clause, because clearly the weapon attacks twice. It seems to me the intention of that clause is to make it clear that you can only use it to attack once in the shooting phase and then it's gone forever and you can't use it again, which makes sense given that it's a grenade and you throw it. But if the attack once clause was supposed to stop this interaction from happening, it would actually also stop the additional 2d6 attacks that you make with the same weapon. So that doesn't make sense. But even still, the probably rules as written and also probably rules as intended method where you determine an initial target and then attack out from there, rolling to hit every time, still has the potential to automatically kill many units in the game. Vehicles, characters, other single model units that can't pull casualties outside 6 inches of their original target will eventually succumb to literally infinite strength 5b attacks. And even large units will be crippled by repeated hits thanks to that brand shiny new blast keyword given to us by the wonderful 9th edition 40k. And that's not even to mention any particular synergies with other orc abilities like more DACA on this thing to make it deal additional damage when you're rolling to hit. It turns out the power of bees is unstoppable.
Not the bees!
Hell, even the mighty Warlord Titan, toting that 18 damage Ariok Power Claw that we talked about at the top of the video, dies to the bottomless anger of the bees if you just chuck them at something sort of near its feet. I think a worthy achievement for the most powerful weapon in Warhammer 40k. That said, there's also some drawbacks here. This isn't the most easily deliverable weapon in 40k. You kind of have to have your opponent cooperate and line their stuff up pretty well for it to go off to its maximum effect, and being a grenade weapon, you can't advance and throw it, so I think the fastest unit you can get it on is a war boss on a bike, maybe. Not to mention that with only a 6-inch range, you can't even teleport in and chuck it, and if you're taking a war boss on a bike, you're eating into your smashy claw boss points, and on top of that, you're taking a snakeskins detachment. I'm not even sure the world-killing power of bees is worth even that cost. On top of that, if you're trying to do this in timed competitive play, imagine trying to resolve literally infinite attacks on your opponent's army while on a chess clock. You're gonna time out, buddy. You just can't do it. Fortunately, the additional attacks are optional, so you can at some point just decide to let your bees go and just move on with your shooting phase. But anyway, that's it for this ridiculous rules and the most powerful weapon in all of tabletop 40k. It's kind of weird. This has not been eroded by Games Workshop at all. It just got the blast keyword, I guess, in 9th edition. That's all that changed about it, so that's kind of wild. Thanks everybody for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please let me know down in the comments if you did. It was a fun one to make, and I like talking about these weird and wacky rules that Warhammer 40k has that sometimes may have unintended consequences. Again, big thanks to my patrons over at patreon.com/tacticaltortoise for supporting the channel, A, and B, also choosing this topic out of a selection of topics that I gave them to do a video on. Really appreciate everybody who helps me out over there, and I really appreciate them and anyone who's watch the end of the video. Y'all are awesome. Remember to keep it classy, folks, and have happy wargaming.